also helps fill it out for nights where people don't want to sign up. Um, and so I'm always, and I prefer that. I feel more comfortable searching for those people. Right now, I am booking the features for our show, but it's something that I would like to get off my plate. Um, and it's the same sort of process for me. Is I go to shows, I don't see anyone who I don't book anybody who I haven't seen live. I'll take it if I watch like a film of theirs where they've done something,
Right.
but I don't go on any recommendations. I don't go on any of the cold calls, which I don't get that often, but I do get. And that kind of, when I first started doing it, kind of blew my mind. I would never have thought to have done that. Uh,
To do a cold
yeah,
call, just call a
just like,
producer up.
yeah. Just that there's people out there who are like emailing everybody. Uh, our mutual buddy Raymond Christian,
Yes,
he's
Ray.
big on that. Hey, can I be on your podcast? He submits.
Right.
He's a go getter in that way. Uh, and so that from that aspect, uh, you can think about it that way too. Is like if you're a teller, start doing that because people like it. It makes it easy, and a lot of producers are lazy. So if you make it easier for them, you become very attractive. I I guess I've got
Right.
a couple other things about that is like pitch people and mention that you have an email list. Mention that you're going to tell your fans that you're going to be at the show and that you're like
Right.
a good team player. And I don't, that wouldn't have a lot of sway for me because I just want to see what you're doing. I appreciate it,
Right.
but I know that when I get booked in a feature slot, you know, people come to see me. And
Right.
so I tell that to people when I do get booked. I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to promote the fuck out of your show and people are going to come up. You're going to have a bigger crowd than normal."
Agreed. I appreciate the idea of the cold calling because or the cold email. That's something that we can all take a look at. I'm jotting that down as a note because you
I got to jump off for just 2 seconds again.
you don't you don't know what possibilities are out there if you don't look for them or if you don't ask for them. When Dan gets back, I'm going to ask him about lists of places where one can be available to be found, seen, heard. It was a very that was a very interesting idea about the finding political philosophies uh, from different people. I had not considered that, and I should have, being a former political science major. The diversity, though, you always want to have a wide variety of players on stage. I want to see the gamut of people and human experience. For example, this past week, we had a show here in North Liberty, Iowa, for Teller's Bridge, and the theme was after party. And the stories all revolved around the theme for the most part, but none were identical, and some were very thought provoking in terms of, oh, the obvious is the after party that you might go to after you've been clubbing or bar hopping, and what's going to happen between 2 and 4 or 4 and 6, whatever. They weren't all that way. And that's what I thought made the show rich in terms of content. Another aspect of this talent recruitment will also be coaching and preparation. And I imagine Dan's got some very good insights with regard to coaching and preparation as we go into a story.
Ah, there we are. So I think that is. I'm glad that you brought that up. It is something that we are starting to implement for the Storyluck show, but it comes about because of running into you guys who did what's that? Stories for the stage and who's what's the USA Today's what
Oh, the storytelling project.
yeah, the storytelling project. And the amount of prep work they did with their features was huge. And
Oh yeah.
so I'm trying to do
Oh
more
yeah.
and more of that. That makes such a huge difference. You see it filtering out in the
Right.
featured shows that used to never happen. Like they just like expected you to work on your story and have your story together. Now they are like, we're gonna work with you to make sure that's sort of branded. Other shows are similar too, but I think that's a very good idea. It helps buy-in. If you aren't paying your features, it also becomes a little bit of an ad that you can give to them. Speaking about add-ons, one of the things that I say is like, I will plug your stuff. So keep
Right.
me in mind. You know, I have an email list. I have a thing. I have a platform, and I can give you ad space. I can boost your signal on these other things that you're working on, and you know that's something that you can give to people. The other thing is people are bad at marketing, so they will forget that. You can set up a Google alert with their name so you get little reminders when they're doing stuff. And also if they're in your feed, just like think about it in those terms that you're like always trying to pay those for people forward. And they
Right.
really appreciate it and remember it. Like I post every day. I have people who are just like my super fans.
How
And
wonderful.
but they've never hit share. You know what I mean? They've never like, oh, I love this. They'll love it all day, hit hearts and talk to me and phone calls and stuff like that, but never share it with their audience. So on a marketing bent, it's a little bit of a failure on my part that I don't mention it enough that I'm
Right.
like, you can share this. You know, it's free to hit the like button, it's free to make a comment, and it's free to hit share. Um, but in terms of this discussion, it's free for you as a producer, and it's something
Right.
nice that you should be giving back to the people who are giving to you as there are being features on your stage.
Uh, with Teller's Bridge, we have several workshops where the month before the
Mm-hmm.
show, that's kind of like preliminary, as I call it, wobbly jello. You bring whatever it is that you've
Yeah.
got, and let's work on it so that it firms up. And then before the show, before the first show, there's a workshop to run it through. And then after the first show, before the second show, we do the same sort of thing, just the show run through and offer feedback for what we saw, heard, and felt. Like, hey, you know what? This was a great line, but you need to pause here to let that sink into the audience so that you get the laughter you deserve coming out of that. Pay attention to your pacing. This is relevant. This is less so, to keep this in time. all those kinds of behind the scenes show notes happen so that we can say, hey, we got in and out within 2 hours. Because much more than 2 hours, the audience really starts to be squirrely, restless. I'll say that. That's probably the better word, restless.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with you. Don't have your show run over 2 hours.
And again, ours does have an intermission so that people can go load up their
Yeah,
drinks or get some more snacks or something like
yeah.
that. That's always good. Um,
I think storytelling is geared for an older audience. That's who comes, and you know, we've got a mutual friend, Howard, who just really laments that there aren't younger people, like the louder than the bomb crew isn't there. But it's
right.
just not, they've got other stuff, you know? It's a different art form, and it's okay. We don't have, there's enough old people. Uh,
Well, yes, and I want to amplify your point. I mean, I let me please finish your point, and then I want to jump
no,
in
that's it.
after your.
That's it. It's just is yeah, that's it.
It's the young. The youngs are not storyless. They're just consuming story in a different way,
Yeah.
and until that sort of storytelling evolves or moves in a direction toward live lit, then we're going to see we have to rely on the older crowd and go from there. It's interesting to consider who was doing what, when, how, and why. I don't know how exactly how old you are,
Sure.
Dan,
I'm a
but
vampire, and I am 2,000 years old.
oh, well, pleased to meet you. I'm Dorian May, and I have this portrait in my attic.
Well,
Thank you. Literature. It's where it's all coming from. And for you youngs who didn't understand that, dig around, you'll get it. Anyhow, um, our generation, I remember when the first real uh, reality television
right.
started with the real
Mm-hmm.
world on when MTV actually showed videos. And that was fascinating. And to see documentation of people's day-to-day lives, it certainly is related to what we do in terms of live lit and wanting to tell stories about our big and small moments in front of people who are absolute strangers to us. And simultaneously, all kinds of people are listening to podcasts and audiobooks. So there is definitely an audience and a hunger for it. We just have to connect on form. We just have to connect on
Yeah.
form.
Well, I think that it's fine to let them have their thing. I think it's fine to go do that thing, but if you're trying, it's a large age range is a very hard, and it is something that I, again, in that like different levels of diversity is one of the harder things to
Right.
like navigate, is like
Mm-hmm.
if you want to get high schoolers and college kids on your stage, how are you
Right.
getting them, and how are you making them feel comfortable when they get there? What's in it for them, and then what do you lose from the people you're going to, like the the slam poetry house gig starts at 11, right? And and is going to be a 3-hour show, right? It's like,
You mean 11
yeah,
p.m.?
right. And so like there's certain people who aren't going to show up to that. Like if you want,
Right.
so so it's just something to think about, is like you're not going to please everybody, and no matter how much you you want diversity, there are certain things that are going to be more difficult, and they're going to be, if you get them, they're going to kind of be special and one-offs, right? If I get a conservative, it'll be the token conservative because I'm trying to do that. If I get a high schooler who won a poetry thing or something like that, or some CPS teacher is like, "Oh, I think my kid, would really be good, and I've sent them to your open mic." Awesome. That's great. I want that. I want that diversity of stuff, but if I built a show completely around them, it would put off a huge swath of my audience. I'd be building a different show.
Right, right. I think it can be encouraged, and I think that it can be part of a mix. Um, but then again, my all my children are in their
Yeah.
20s, and when they come to a moth or something like that, I'm there, but sometimes it's like, why am I not listening to all these old people talk and tell stories? Do I care? And they haven't crossed the threshold where the stories are valuable yet. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that we will continue to talk about, is the value of stories, because we tell stories because they're valuable in some way, shape, or form.
Sure, sure. But also like the mode of telling it in this way and what they are might,
Right.
if it's not for them, it's not for them, and that's okay. Uh, but it's also, yeah, it's okay, and it's a little bit by design of these shows
Right.
that they're just catering for other people.
Yes. The Another aspect of this, we talked about coaching and preparation, but let's dig back into that. Um, Being able to coach people and put it in a way that is uplifting and affirming, as opposed to a bullying type of club that tears someone down, is hard. Striking the right tone is a difficult thing to do at times,
Mm-hmm.
and
Uh,
that's an important consideration that has to be maintained.
yeah. Speaking of that sort of thing, in Chicago's a very sort of like, can be a very clicky, dramatic art scene, and it can feel like a bigger deal than it is, which just amplifies the tension. Do you ever run into that?
Well, yes, to the degree
Mm-hmm.
of this, you keep your critiques and your criticisms of uh, storytellers and producers uh, to yourself. Uh,
Mm.
I think that blunt critique is one thing, but if you say something like, I heard this and I wasn't sure, could you clarify how you got from this place to this place? And they are defensive, then that's on them. If you're offering criticism or feedback in a way that's constructive, and not everybody can do that, to be perfectly honest,
Mm-hmm.
then it's out of your hands. All of our criticisms and fatigues, feedback, um, are subject to the storyteller's choice to approve or disapprove. And it doesn't matter if you're spot on. If they don't want to hear it, you can't force that. And then at the same time, speaking ill of a producer, that's the fastest way for one to be left out. So we can always encourage and we can always hope, we can always show up early, we can always be well prepared and handle ourselves in a professional manner.
Yeah.
But that the body of your work is going to speak better to that than you speaking about X, Y, or Z producer or storyteller. If
Yeah.
you have one blemish on your record, though, compared to the body of your work, I would think that people who are knowledgeable and see your work would be able to say quite clearly that was a one off, that was something out of that person's control.
Right. Right. Right.
I mean, for example, if you're out running and your dog gets hit and you've got a show in 2 hours, if you're
Sure. Sure. Sure.
if you contact me as a producer, I'm like, take care of your dog.
Yeah. 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 Of course. Um. Yeah. I don't know.
Because I don't want
I'm
to
a
be a
hater.
monster.
I'm
You
a
said
hater.
you're a hater.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I kind of maybe I breed the drama. I think maybe when I turn 2,200, I'll reach the level of professionalism that you're aspiring to. But a little bit, I do get some fire in my belly, and it creates some motivation. Like I build things because I hate what somebody else built.
That's legitimate. That's
Uh,
legitimate. As long
and
as you're not
so,
in somebody, it's not as long as you are not in that other creator's face telling him you suck, and as a result,
well, this is what I'm telling you. This is what I'm telling you. I'm a little bad. This is confession time.
oh snap.
Yeah. The Moth sucks. It can suck it. And it's a horrible show. I hate that it's as popular as it is. Uh,
But
and
that
there's other ones, but the things that. So here's a thing about producing is that sometimes the things that you think are awesome and will propel you aren't the thing. And so you got to listen to that audience reaction and be like
mhm.
checking in on it. Uh, some a lot of times this is something that I run into personally is I like very complicated setups. And I just want it maybe this is something to do with my ADHD. I want it to be more complicated. I want more hoops to jump through. I want more riddles. I want you to have to solve puzzles to get in the door. I want you to wear funny hats and have fake names, like endless.
Dan, were you
Uh,
a Castlevania fan for?
for sure. Um,
I felt that. I felt that just right there. I had to ask.
yeah, and I will tell you very clear feedback that simpler is better. You know, that keep it simple, buddy concept people like. And so we talked about it a little bit in that last episode is figure out your customer journey. Where are the pain points? Where is there any friction? You want as little friction as possible. Uh, and I
When you say
think this,
friction, you're not saying the conflict, or you're saying smoothness to get to the pain point.
well, smooth. Well, I'm not talking about stories. I'm talking about the atmosphere of the event.
Ah, okay. Sorry, sorry.
You don't want people to be confused about where the bathroom is. You don't want them
Right.
to be confused as to whether this is a call and response section. You don't want them to be confused around what's the name of the feature? Is this a feature or is this a walk up? Is this, you never want them to be confused and
Got it.
struggling with things. You want it as simple as possible. And the only sort of, what I have found is the only sort of complication is what you're talking about, is like the conflict and the emotional investment all goes into the stories that are happening.
Got
And
it.
everything else is just smooth for
Gotcha.
them.
So your show mechanics here.
Right. And
Right.
so similarly, you want this to be involved with your features. They have a complicated task where they have to be masters of their craft for 8 to 10 minutes on stage with everybody in front of them. You know, they judging them. And so you want to be in their corner the whole time.
Yes.
No matter what they do, you're on the same team. You're with them. You defend them against that negativity that could be swirling up in the crowd. You
Right.
get the crowd on their side before and after the show. You give them their laurels, as it were, and you hand hold them through the process. So, especially in these shows, you're usually not paying people. So we've already talked about other things you can sort of brainstorm to give them if you're not paying them. But one of the great things that you can give them is just clarity as to what it's going to be like when you get to the show.
Right.
And this is something that I'm working on building out more and more, where send them emails beforehand reminding them what's going on. You're going to be at the show. This is what I'm going to tell you. You are in the lineup. This is how the night's going to go. This is what you can expect. And just keep checking in with them.
Right.
And a lot of features who you would think have egos and thick skin don't. And being holding them like a Fabergé egg that you really care for means the world to them.
Right. That's a great note. Check in frequently. And then establishing a show order.
Yeah. Create a rundown
Right.
of what happens. If you think about it in terms of like the theater world and plays, there is a master general up at the top, and all they do is they run through a list. This happens at 1 minute and 2 minute and 3 minute and 4 minute, and they're on a mic and they're coordinating with people, but they're just following the rundown of the show. And so you know, as you build this out, build out that rundown so you know what's happening from minute to minute to minute. And the Story Luck show has that. We have it in 10 and 15 minute sort of increments.
Right.
But everybody behind the scenes has access to that list.
Nice. In terms of show construction, opener, where do you put your? I mean, every show a has several strong storytellers, and then there are ones of
Yeah.
varying experience and skill levels. And where do you place those in order to make certain that the show is balanced? So you've got strong storytellers in the first half, and some of the um, novices, not to hide them, but in order to balance the show so that the second half of the show, which is often traditionally talent heavy, especially your closers, your openers and your closers, are usually supposed to be pretty strong.
Yeah, that's how I like it. You know, that's the main focus. The opening and the closing.
I like to have if I like to have a first half or first act closer who's pretty strong, or sometimes very strong, so that you go into the intermission feeling good, and then having a strong second half opener to carry that water and bring people back into the storytelling mindset to be the recipients of those stories.
Yeah.
Mm, very good. I think we're chock full of information now. I was a little delinquent in getting my Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube all set up, but now they're there. I would imagine that next week I'll be smart enough to get them all at the very beginning so that this will be beamed out. We're creating something good here, Dan, and I really want to admonish the audience to check back and watch as much of this as possible so then they can catch up. And again, by the end of these 4, possibly 5 weeks, they have a blueprint by which they can create a storytelling show from abstract to the concrete.
Yeah. I think what I'd like us to do is do this exact sequence again. And we go through it and we do this sort of streaming podcast a little more structured so we have the call sheet next time and we just like run through it and like have our bullet points and maybe we build up a PowerPoint to go behind us or something like that.
Oh, we could, but both of us are charming in and of our own selves. What I would say is
Yeah.
that if you tune in and give us your information, personally identifiable information, we'll give you a PDF of the steps that we are outlining here so that you've got something concrete as well. So, and that's on behalf of Teller's Bridge on my behalf and Storylook on Dan's behalf. And we'll be more than willing to share that.
Yeah, that was awesome. All right. Good talk, and I will see everybody next week, Friday.